Hi, let's paint some graceful looking swan in the lake. In this tutorial, I will also show you how to paint some simple water ripples. Welcome to Run My Arts watercolor tutorial series. Whether it's summertime or winter, the swan never cease to get our attention, don't they? And this particular footage was taken in late September last year in the city of Strasbourg, France. And this tree swan is going to be my reference photo for the tutorial today. And this painting is going to be of portrait orientation. I'm using the Canson cold press watercolor paper, 300 grams per square meter. And it is of A5 size. And over here I am just sharing the sketch process of the three swans. Nothing complicated in case you're interested. Alright, done with the sketch, and the first color that I'm going to use is a very dull looking blue shade, and this color is going to be used to paint the lake. And if you notice from the reference photo on the left hand side, the color of the lake is much darker towards the bottom, and I'm going to paint this using the wet on wet technique. So before I paint in that blue shade, I am just pre-wetting with clean water and then quickly applying the color mix that I made earlier. Here's an up close of the painting process. So usually when you're painting very generous area of work, as in large area of work, I would advise to use a wet on wet technique. For example, painting a sea, lake, river, or even the sky, because as you pre-wet the paper and apply the paint mix, it is much more easier to make the washes, simply because the pre-wet surface acts as a medium for the watercolor paint. And if you notice some part of the pre-wet paper or surface has dried, just quickly re-wet them with the damp brush, because some of us may work very quickly and some of us may go at a very slow pace. So worry not, just pre-wet the paper again. So the second color for the lake is a much brighter shade, and it has more of the green color hint, because I have mixed permanent green with yellow, Indian yellow, and arrived at this color mix. And also extending the same color towards the bottom part of the painting. So to kickstart painting the swan figure, I am going to use a mix of sapphire with a little bit of yellow ochre and arrived at a yellowish brown tone, and just applying that to some part of the swan's body, because the swan is not entirely white. And after that I am using a clean damp brush to give it some light washes. So as you can see now, the first color that I applied has been softened or made much lighter with the glazing of the damp brush. So I'm extending the same method to all the swan figure. So basically this technique gives you a off-white feel, or off-white color. And this off-white color not just gives you a natural look, but it also defines the shape of the swan's figure. So you can use this technique to paint any white colored animal or figure. And if you're curious to know more about this painting technique, I have a video which might be of your interest, which is painting polar bears in two different tones. I will leave the link to the tutorial on the screen as well as in the description. Now the second color for the swan's figure is going to be a cool grey, and you can achieve this by mixing a dull blue as in ultramarine or cobalt blue. I'm using sapphire blue mixed with some burnt sienna. Mix these two colors until you arrive at this grey tone. And once again, just like the first yellowish brownish tone, I am applying the grey color first onto the figure of the swan, and then using a damp brush to give it light washes. So basically it's the same technique with a secondary color. Alright, done with the swan for now. I am going to paint some water ripples onto the lake, and this time I am not using a wet in wet method. Instead it's going to be wet paint on dry paper, and the color that I'm using this time is going to be of a darker shade so that the lighter color in the first layer could show. And I have mixed permanent green with a little bit of sapphire to arrive at this color. And I would advise you to use a brush with a narrow tip in order to paint the fine lines of the water ripples. Now I am adding sapphire blue into the same green mix to paint some darker areas or shadow onto the water ripple area. Just casually paint the water ripples. You don't have to be so technical or calculative about it, but you would have noticed by now all those contrasting color mixes that we made gives the painting more life and looks more natural. The lighter green shade in the first layer of painting indicates the reflection of natural light. Now adding more blue in order to achieve a darker blue shade to paint the bottom half of this painting. As I mentioned earlier from the reference photo, the bottom part of the lake looks much darker. Alright, over here I noticed that some of my darker shade colors have actually overlapped the lighter color in the bottom of the painting. So I'm using a clean damp brush to lift out some pigment. You can also use this technique to soften all those hard lines or hard edges as a result of those dry painting. To experiment some extra effects, I am going to use my water spray bottle to spray some clean water, and you can see the effect of the droplets or spray, water spray onto the wet painting. Now to paint some finer details on the swan, I am using a smaller size brush and kickstarting to paint the beak of the swan using an orange or tangerine color. If you don't have this color, just mix some lemon yellow with your red shades. Next, I have mixed sapphire with some black to paint the black areas onto the beaks of the swan as well as its eye. And after applying the paint, I'm going to use a damp brush to give it some light washes so that the black paint doesn't look too harsh. Next, I am going to further fine-tune the figures of the swan, and once again I am using that cool grey mix that I showed earlier in this tutorial. And once again, the same technique whereby I apply the paint first and then softening it by giving it some light washes using a clean damp brush. Alright, next I am going to paint some shadow onto the water areas, and I have mixed some black with the dark blue shade. As I said, the bottom part of this painting is of a blue shade, which is why I decided to add in some blue into the shadow color. While I paint the shadow of the swan, I am also using the same paint mix to paint the much more fine-tuned water ripples. And in order to paint these fine lines, I would advise you to use a brush with finer tip, as in a rigger brush or script brush. Now painting the shadow for the swans at the bottom part of the water area, and if you notice that your blue mix is less visible, then I would advise you to add in more black into your color mix so that the shadow could appear much darker. Now painting more water ripples, and as I said earlier, you can just paint this in a very casual manner, and Of course, usually the water ripples appears around the object that's floating on it. So just follow that shape casually and paint the water ripples. Now some splatters using white gouache to add some reflection or shine onto the surface of the water. A little bit of water spray onto that white splatters that I did to create some extra magic. More splatters with the white gouache paint, and this time I am using my fan brush to achieve a much more smaller splatters. You can use your old toothbrush in order to achieve this. You don't necessarily need to invest in a fan brush. And I am using the white gouache paint mix to paint a little bit of shine onto the water ripples here and there. You can use your scrape brush in order to paint this, since it appears much more narrow compared to the darker water ripples. Just a bit more and we are done with this painting tutorial. So how do you like the water ripples and shine effect, as well as the white swans? And for your information, I also have a tutorial on painting a goose, and if you'd like to check out, I'll leave the link into the description. If you have become a fan of my work, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel. Hope to see you all again on another exciting tutorial. See you again. Bye.